For many years, my husband and I have collected antique architectural salvage. We've been especially drawn to those chippy, crusty, old, rusty cast iron pieces. Watch today as I try to recreate that crusty old iron finish with the new Juliette mold and my favorite rusting techniques. I imagined a mirror that was surrounded by those beautiful roses. So I had JR build a frame for me that would fit the width of the Juliette mold. For my mirror, I used 9 separate resin castings of the Juliette mold and some additional clay castings. To prep the frame for the molds, I gave it a quick coat of white paint. Days to come and carry us like wind in our sails. Now let's make our molds. I've used a 2-part quick set epoxy for my resin. You mix 1 part of A, 1 part of B, and mix them together, pour them into the mold, allowing the resin to settle into all of the details. It's going to take about 10 minutes for that resin to set up. When the resin becomes completely opaque, it takes about 10 minutes or so. You can demold as long as the resin casting comes away easily from the side of the mold. We designed our framework so that 9 molds would fit with a little bit of wiggle room. The molds are designed so that they can fit end to end and create one seamless casting. We are dreamers of the shore. JR was a little concerned about the added weight of the resin molds, but no problem. I also used some air dry clay in my mold so that I could fill in small gaps and spaces between the resin castings. Dust the inside of the mold with cornstarch for easier removal of the clay. Press the air dry clay into the mold using the micro rim as a guide to remove any excess clay with your thumbs and fingers. I can smell the shore, it's right in front of us if we... You can flatten the back of the IOD clay casting by using a credit card or a putty knife and the micro rim as a guide. Juliette is a very detailed, intricate design with interconnecting elements, so we like to pop our mold into the freezer for about 30 minutes or so to facilitate easier removal of the clay. We had a few broken pieces, but that's okay. We'll use those later. Just keep on believing. We are dreamers of the shore. Now it's time to add those broken bits and small parts of the air dry clay castings to the spaces between my resin castings. I used Titebond Quick and Thick to glue both the resin and air dry clay castings in place. And because the resin can get a little bit of a buckle to it, I want to add some weight over top of each of the castings that I glue down. I clean up any excess glue that seeps out from underneath the pieces with a Q-tip or a damp cloth. After the glue has completely dried, I'm going to give the entire piece a base coat of black paint. Because I'm going to be adding multiple layers of wet paint and rust effect, I've chosen to use our Fusion Coal Black paint, which has a built-in top coat. You want to use an older, stiff brush so that you can get around all of the edges and sides of the mold pieces. It's time for me to mix up a rust-colored paint, so I've chosen Tuscan Orange and Chocolate. Both are fusion colors. And then I dab those randomly over the roses. I'm picking up the different colors on my brush and allowing there to be several different tones of that brown and orange paint. Create another layer of rust, I'm using Pentart's Rust Effect set. I sprinkle some of the rust powder into the wet paint, or I also just pick it up with my brush that has wet paint on it, and then I'll dab that into different areas of the mirror frame where I have the painted rust colors. I've even added some of our Fusion Fresco texturing powder into the paint and mixed it all together to put on the mirror, since my goal is to get as much crusty, chippy layers of texture that I can. So for the next layer of texture, I'm adding Pentart's One Step Crackle. I'll add that in random spots over the frame. And finally, I'm going to spritz the rusted areas that had the rust powder with a variety of the Regent sprays. This is going to oxidize that rust powder. After a final coat of white paint, the oxidation will occur from the rust and the crackle will occur even through that coat of white paint. Just like in real life, no matter how many coats of paint you apply over rust, if it's not sealed, it's going to continue to seep through that painted finish. As a final step, I'm going to apply some dark wax over the entire frame and then wipe back any excess with clear wax, allowing the dark wax to settle into all of the lower details. At the end of this video, I'll share a link to another live tutorial that I did creating a rust effect on poly resin garden pots. We popped in a mirror and cleaned it up, and there you go. I have a beautiful focal point frame with a cast iron finish using the new IOD Juliette Mould. You can find all of the products that I used at lnjgoods.com or at our brick and mortar shop in Medina, New York. And hey, while you're here, we'd love to have you subscribe and check out this video that we shared showing you how to create this awesome cast iron effect.